I heard Riri Williams was a genius, but I said to myself, Parker, you gotta meet this kid up close.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Ironheart. Now, if you have not seen all 3 episodes, don't worry, we are spoiler-free in each section, and the episodes are chapter marked below. As always, remember you can listen to ScreenCrush on all your favorite podcast platforms, and right now we are running a massive summer sale at our merch store, 20% off the whole site. You can also become a member to get free stuff, links are below. Now, let's break this first episode down. The title of the episode is Take Me Home, which of course is about Riri returning to Chicago.
Yes, now, who is she again?
Yeah, actually, I don't blame you for forgetting. We covered all this on our recent recap video, but here's a quick rundown. Riri Williams was in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, which released about 2.5 years ago. She was a 15-year-old genius student at MIT who invented a vibranium detector just to prove to one of her professors that it could be done. Then her professor sold the design to the United States government, and they used it to find vibranium in the ocean. And this led to Namor killing the people in the boat and seizing the detector. Riri also built a prototype of her very own Iron Man armor, but it's not enough to fight off the Talicons, that's the undersea people, who kidnap her to make sure she can't build another vibranium detector. But she's rescued by the Wakandans, and this kicks off a war between these two secretive superpowers. Just before the final battle, Shuri helps Riri design a new suit, but then she made her give it back at the end of the movie.
Your suit, it's a great design, but can't let you leave with it. It's all good.
Now, in the comics, her origin story is pretty different, but we're going to talk about that as we go along. So we start with Riri remembering her best friend, Natalie. Now, these moments are shot to almost look like old photographs, with the onion skin images giving this kind of echo, like Riri's past is echoing in her mind. They film a selfie together, which is probably right after she was accepted into MIT. Now, then she name checks a few big shots in the tech industry.
Just to let you know, your girl finna be bigger than Jobs.
Right.
Bigger than Gates.
Right.
Bigger than Pym.
Right.
Bigger than Stark.
Yeah.
With Pym referring to Hank Pym, founder of Pymtech, and Stark referring, of course, to Tony Stark. Now, in the comics, Riri is tied very closely to Tony Stark and his legacy. She was a big fan of Iron Man, which inspired her to create her own armor at MIT. She was expelled for using school resources for an unapproved project, but then she stole the armor anyways. Tony took her in to mentor her, and after he died, he left her with an AI hologram of himself to tutor her. So the show is picking up elements of that without having to actually pay Robert Downey Jr. millions of dollars to appear in the series. Natalie admits that her MCU crush is Thor.
What do you want more than anything? A knife with Thor in his hammer.
Which is, pretty standard.
I don't think Thor's technically a god.
Well, you haven't been near his arms.
Now, see, for me, it would be F Thor.
It's like his muscles are made of Katati metal fibers.
Not to mention that he made goddesses faint upon sight of his other hammer. Now, all of this is a pretty standard dead loved one flashback like we've seen many times before.
What are you doing, John?
Looking at you.
But it is necessary in this episode to show us Riri's trauma. Just like in the comics, her stepdad and best friend were killed in a drive-by shooting. And the reason she's making suits isn't so she can be a superhero.
My suits would shorten the response time of first responders, firefighters, search and rescue teams, etc.
Maybe if the EMTs and firefighters would have had these suits, then her stepdad and best friend would still be alive. But this is also setting up the end of the episode when Natalie's consciousness becomes her new AI. But more on that in a bit.
Hey, guess what? It says here that robot politicians are going to vaccinate our kids and turn them into AI.
Doug, that's not...
Wait, hold on. I am still reading. We just need to pay for this newsletter to stop the robot hordes. May I have your credit card number, please?
No, that is fake news. None of that is true.
Ah, jeez. Then how am I to know which news to believe?
I know it's hard because most news out there is hyped up by a corporation just to get you engaged to sell you ads. It's really hard to stay informed today because you don't really know what news you can trust. Most mainstream media sites have a profit bias. They just want to feed you stories that up your engagement and confirm your existing bias. And that's why, if you want to cut through the bias and hear the real news, I recommend Ground News. They're the sponsor of this video. I like Ground News so much, I subscribe to it on my own. Ground News is an app and website that gathers related articles from across the world into one place. But they give you the context about the source's political leaning, their reliability, and most importantly, their ownership. This means that you can see through the bias and think critically about the news you consume. For instance, here's a story about Republicans wanting a tax cut on guns. Sources from the left talk about how this is showing the GOP infighting, while forces on the right highlight this as a win for gun advocates. I can also see how many sources reported on this story, how many of them lean right or left, or like like I said, who owns those news sources. That way I know who has an angle in telling this story a certain way. I also want to know that the news isn't trying to sway me one way or the other. So they even have a blind spot section that shows you the news stories that each side is ignoring. For instance, here's a story about how plastic bag bans have cleaned up the litter on shores that was barely reported on the right. And the left has barely reported on this story about Trump saying Tucker Carlson called to apologize for criticizing him. Ground News is an incredible resource, and I have been looking for a service like Ground News for years. I highly encourage you to check them out. If you go to ground.news/SC or click this QR code, you'll get 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to every feature. Your subscription will not only help us out here at the channel, but you'll also be supporting an independent platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. Now, back to what I was saying. Riri narrates this opening montage showing her working around the MIT campus. Now, MIT is not only where she goes to school in the comics and in Wakanda Forever, but it's also the alma mater of Tony Stark in the MCU. We first saw this mentioned here in this clipping in the Tony Stark montage of Iron Man 1. But remember, Tony Stark gave a talk at MIT in Captain America's Civil War, where he talked about himself, but then gave everybody a bunch of money.
All of your projects have just been approved and funded. No streets, no taxes. Reframe the future!
So Riri going to MIT shows how she is the next generation of Tony Stark. Like Tony, she's also headstrong, she doesn't play by the rules, and she has a darker side. Tony was an arms dealer for years, and even after he became a superhero, his desire for control and his ego led him to create Ultron. And he also wanted revenge on Bucky for killing his mom. While Riri faces her own temptation in this episode, to become a thief. Now she tells herself that it's for the greater good, the same lie that Stark always told himself.
My old man had a philosophy. Peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy. My father helped defeat the Nazis. He worked on the Manhattan Project. A lot of people, including your professors at Brown, will call that being a hero. In this montage, we also see footage from Wakanda Forever of Riri working with Shuri to build her suit. Now, she calls this an internship abroad, and Wakanda actually does have an internship program like this in the comics. But all of this heroic stuff is intercut with her hustling to make money on the side, selling projects and test results to students at other schools. But she's not raising money to build the suit, she needs an AI to power it.
Oh, but why?
Well, going back to the first Iron Man movie, like as soon as Tony builds his second version of the suit, he installed his AI Jarvis into it. The suits have so many different functions all happening at once that it takes an artificial intelligence to monitor everything going on. This is why, as soon as Tony loses Jarvis, he uploads Friday into his new suit. And it's why Peter got Karen in Spider-Man Homecoming. In fact, according to Daniel RPK, many of these AI are going to be in humanoid form in the upcoming series Vision Quest, which I am like bananas excited for. In the library, she stashes her cash in the book Look Out for the Little Guy, Scott Lang's autobiography that we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But the other book here is open to Chapter 2 in the Dickens novel Great Expectations. Note the line here, the things I contemplated must be done. The novel is about an orphan named Pip who, like Riri, struggles to rise up through the upper classes. Now for Pip, it's about rising through the English aristocracy. But for Riri, she's trying to overcome poverty to live the life of a superhero science bro. There's also the notion that Riri is suffering from the great expectations of carrying on the mantle of Iron Man. And Great Expectations also contributes to the theme of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Miles has to write a paper on the novel, and he ends up creating a graffiti of the same name because he has the great expectations to live up to the legacy of Peter Parker. And notice during the exchange, she's wearing a Michael Jordan shirt, a nod to her hometown of Chicago. And on the whiteboard here, there's kind of a cool nod to the movie Sinners, which was written and directed by Ryan Coogler, this show's producer. So this reads Griot's algorithm, and a griot is a storyteller in West African folklore. In the movie Sinners, Sammy is one of these storytellers. Griot is also the name of Shuri's AI in Wakanda Forever, who guided Riri during her chase from the feds. I think she's written it down here to try to break down how it worked so she could replicate it for her new suit. But the griot algorithm is also a real concept. It's the idea that the way African storytellers passed on knowledge could become the basis for an AI developed by African scientists. After selling this guy a force field, she flips through her notebook and we see power with the question mark, because without an arc reactor, Riri would have a hard time figuring out how to power her suit. I also think this question about power is going to come into play in future episodes based on what I've seen in the trailer. I promise I haven't watched ahead. These are no spoilers. And we see that she has drawn several designs of the armor on different pieces of paper, similar to how Tony's original plans could only be read if he stacked them on top of each other. And then we see Professor Wilkes. This is Jim Rash reprising his cameo from Captain America Civil War. Now Rash had that cameo because he worked with the Russo brothers on the show Community. This is also why Danny Pudi, Yvette Nicole Brown, and Ken Jeong have all appeared in their MCU films. In fact, actually, with Joel McHale and Donald Glover appearing in different Spider-Man movies, only 3 members of the Greendale 7 have not appeared in the MCU. Then it turns out that she was actually narrating to her counselor, following the long-standing MCU tradition of narrators actually talking to people who are in the scene, like we saw with Tony Stark, Thor, and Korg. And guys, I am so excited to show you these new shirts that we just launched for our merch store. Now, we made these special for the movies that are coming out next month. First, check out the July 2025 shirt showing 2 rockets passing each other, the Fantastic Four and Kal-Els. And then we have Brian from Family Guy as Crypto, who's a good boy. And for the Fantastic Four, we have this parody of them on Abbey Road, but hey, where's Sue Storm at? And then we have the Fantastic Four as the Jetsons, celebrating the retro future aesthetic of the film, as well as Clobber in Time, Flame On, and this image of The Thing as John Carpenter's The Thing. Right now, we're also running a summer sale, 20% off, and if you become a member, you can earn rewards and get free stuff. I just want to thank you guys so much for your support, and the links for those are below. As they're confronting her about selling tests, Jim Rash says,
"Quite frankly, you have been a horrible steward of Stark's legacy."
And I love the subtle bit of self-importance here, that because he met Tony Stark one time backstage, he feels like he's an authority on Tony Stark's legacy. As she's snatching her gear, the song T by Cobra plays, and it's a song about a girl getting over a breakup by talking shit. And the first line is, "The Queen has arrived." So Riri has now broken up with MIT, but she's looking to keep what's hers. Just like in the comics, she grabs her armor on the way out of MIT, and notice how the armor still has little Tinkerbell jets in her hands, just like in every variation of Tony's armor. Now, her AI in the suit was provided by the school, and it's a pencil named Trevor. Now, this seems inspired by the annoying Microsoft paperclip that always pop up and ask if you needed help. Her password is 30216RW, and this is probably a nod to her first appearance back in 2016 and her first appearance as Ironheart in Iron Man Volume 3, Issue 3. And there's also similarities here to Tony Stark's first fight out of his garage in Iron Man 1. And even though both characters ostensibly built their armor to do good deeds, they both have a lot of fun flying around in it. Now, when she asks for a route to Chicago, he brings up the 70s rock band, and actually it's one of the best live shows I've ever seen. They played with Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was incredible, highly recommend. And I want to note that technically Riri did not steal anything. She paid for this armor with her own grant money. Next, we meet the Hoods gang hiding in a van that promises friendly neighborhood service, maybe a nod to the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. 2 of the gang members are called the Blood Siblings, but I think they could be a nod to the Blood Brothers, a pair of alien villains from the comics. One of them is named Clown, who is an absolutely brutal assassin from the Matt Fraction Hawkeye run, and Slug is also a gangster supervillain who I think has nothing in common with the character in this show. And the great Eric Andre plays Stuart Clark, aka Rampage. Now, in the comics, he started a failing business called Clark Futuristics, and when his company collapsed, he stole an exoskeleton for himself and fought the Champions, a West Coast-based team that started in the 1970s. And actually, the Champions will probably be coming soon to the MCU as the super team that Kamala Khan forms while she's in California.
What do you want? I'm putting together a team, and I want you on it.
Now, to get in the house, the Blood Siblings use a pyrotechnic called Dragon's Breath. Remember that for later, it'll probably be important. And when the alarm goes off, everybody breaks out into one of those highly unrealistic movie fights where everybody is an expert in hand-to-hand combat instead of just pointing guns at each other. But this slide across the table was very cool. The person in the chair in the passenger seat of the Hood's Humboldt electric car is played by none other than the legendary Shea Coulee, who is also from Chicago.
My name is Shea Coulee, and I'm from Chicago.
Now, after they call the heist off, we meet the gang leader, Anthony Ramos's Parker Robbins, aka The Hood. Now, The Hood was created by Brian K. Vaughan, Kyle Holtz, and Eric Powell, and he debuted in his own comic, The Hood Issue 1. Now, I recently read this comic book for the first time, and it's pretty damn good. I always knew The Hood from his role in Civil War, where he unites all the supervillains into one team that he leads. But the comic book shows us that Parker Robbins was really a small-time loser, whose life was always split into good and evil halves. Like, he visits a prostitute, but he has a loving wife at home. He idealizes the villain Electro, but turns down a job from a Hydra agent. And this duality plays into his powers, which have a demonic nature. See, he was an ordinary small-time crook who stole the boots and cloak of a demon, which give him powers like invisibility, teleportation, and enchanting his pistols to make them more powerful. But the cloak actually made him a host for the spirit of Dormammu, who you remember we saw in Doctor Strange.
Dormammu! I've come to bargain! Dormammu! Dormammu! Dormammu!
Mommy! 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 Mama!
And there are also strong mystical and demonic themes in this show. Parker's back tattoos seem to be a stylized version of a Taino sun symbol, which is the name of the indigenous people of Puerto Rico. The Taino sun symbol represents life, creation, origin of all life, and symbolizes inner strength. Parker also wears the flag of Puerto Rico on his chest as a tattoo, representing the large Puerto Rican population within Chicago. So we go from the aborted heist to a doomsayer on the street.
Thanos was just the beginning!
Now, anytime we see a doomsayer like this in a movie or TV show, we're always meant to think that he's crazy, but there is usually a hidden importance in their words. For instance, in The Watchmen, the crazy doomsayer turned out to be Rorschach. Now that could be referring to the upcoming multiversal crisis with incursions, but more likely it's about a demonic entity set to take over the Earth later this season. And right when he says,
"They can't save us this time!"
Riri's faceplate drops from the sky, a way to say that sure, Tony Stark can't save you, but Ironheart can. After she's locked out of her armor, it begins to disintegrate, and I just love this whole sequence. Like, the entire scene is shot as if they actually had to film a person who was flying. It's like the team asked themselves, if we had to film a flying person, where would we mount the camera? And that's how we get this great shot where the camera is strapped to her legs as the rocket falls off. This kind of care in the CGI is important because subconsciously, we know when an effect shot would be impossible to shoot, and that takes us out of the illusion. Like this shot of Bruce Willis in Die Hard 2. There's actually no way they could have put the camera to capture that shot without visual effects, so it just doesn't feel realistic. The armor falling apart is also like her first mission in the comics, when her suit basically disintegrates after she punches a truck. And the title is done by creating words within the scene, and we saw this a lot in the underrated Marvel show Ms. Marvel. She lands next to a mural painted by Mitchell Caton and Calvin Jones, which celebrates black artists such as Billie Holiday, Dizzy Gillespie, Moms Mabley, Nat King Cole, Stevie Wonder, Josephine Baker, and several others. This is the South Side of Chicago, a traditionally black neighborhood that still proudly advertises this business as black-owned. And this is also Riri's neighborhood in the comics. As she's walking down the street, they call her
Iron Girl, say.
And she also went through a similar struggle in the comics, trying to decide on a name for herself that wasn't a diminutive version of Iron Man, like Iron Girl. And this person on the side of this building might look familiar to fans of the Fast and the Furious franchise, That's Your Mom. And speaking of moms, we meet Riri Williams, Riri's mother, who is an important part of her life in the comics. Now, unlike a lot of teen superheroes who hide their double life from their families, Ronnie is a constant supporter of her daughter's gifts. When Riri enters her mother's house, Miss Stanton, played by Canadian actress Cree Summer, instinctively begins saging the area around Riri to
just clearing the stank aura that you drug in with you, don't mind me.
Now, this is a common practice among spiritual practitioners to clean negative energy off of crystals or other ritual objects. Riri's mother asks Miss Stanton,
which crystal is for wise asses who've been kicked out of school?
Black obsidian.
And Miss Stanton mentions black obsidian. And in Agatha All Along, this is also the stone that the Coven uses to protect the pathway for the Green Witch, Rio.
Heard you guys were having a party.
Black obsidian is used by spiritualists and in witchcraft for protection, for grounding, and for aligning with your path. This stone is great for Riri because she's entering a new chapter of her life. She's in a state of transition and quickly entering potentially dangerous circles. Now, when Riri's mother asks her,
why do you insist on building your own death trap?
She responds with,
because I can.
Which is a callback to the night her father and Natalie died in the shooting, where her father says,
and why'd you do it?
Because I could.
About building a brand new engine. This was a very sweet nod to how her father's influence is just as impactful to her story as Natalie's. Now, Xavier is also a friend of Riri's from the comics, but they've apparently got a much closer connection in the show because he is Natalie's brother. He raps under the name Gorgeous George, and I think it's really cool that he made a literal mixtape, but he also has to hand Riri a Walkman so she can listen to it. He asks her about her Barracuda, and she replies,
I don't have it anymore. I sold it for money. For my suit.
And this is heartbreaking. In the comics, the Barracuda was her stepdad's car, and they worked on it together. And we also see it in Wakanda Forever. It's the car that Okoye drives in the chase with the feds. Now, it was trashed, but Shuri restored it as a gift for Riri. Now, this car was what she had left of her stepdad, and she sold it to raise money for her suit. And this shows how she is pouring her heart and soul into creating this machine, which is an interesting contrast to Tony Stark. Tony Stark built the Iron Man suit as he was discovering that he had a heart, while Riri built her suit by sacrificing her heart.
Like the pharaohs of old.
What? That makes no sense.
Oh, yeah, no, I was thinking about something else. Never mind.
Okay, now at the auto parts store, we see clippings that tell us that Riri won a high school science fair when she was just 12 years old, and they mention that she was a Tony Stark Fellow. Now, a Tony Stark Fellow is one of the recipients of Tony's grant money, like we saw in Civil War. But we also see that Riri graduated high school in 2020, so she's actually not in the crowd that Tony speaks to in that movie. After John offers Riri a job, she goes to this pizza parlor to meet up with him, and she passes by this poster of the Chicago Bulls championships listed. In the freight elevator, she's given a death trap test, you know, like something out of Saw. And this is a chance for us to see who Riri really is. Instead of following the rules and trying to get out a gas mask that they provide for her, she decides to literally think outside of the box and liberate herself from death. And when she meets the team, she recognizes Rampage from a Tech Builder Discord. Just filing that information away for later. Or maybe I'll talk about it on our very own free-to-join Discord server. Links are in the description. Now, I have not seen any episodes past this first one, but to me, it looks like this show is going to be about temptation. Riri is at a crossroads. She has this incredible talent, but as she likes to point out, she does not have Tony Stark's resources. At this point, she is ambitious and unscrupulous. I mean, she could become a supervillain, and she would be like the best kind of villain, one who has a relatable motivation, who is doing crime for the right reasons. She wants to make a suit that saves people, but she also wants the recognition for being the suit's creator. She wants to be iconic. So this is how Parker knows exactly what to tempt her with. And she gives in to this first devil's bargain, offering to bend the law as long as nobody gets hurt. At home, she listens to Xavier's mixtape and realizes that he sampled her best friend Natalie's last answering machine message to him. And this triggers her trauma and a flashback to the night that her stepdad and Natalie died. She tells him that instead of rebuilding the entire car, she could just swap out one part and get more power. And I think this is setting us up for the rest of the season. Riri has just taken a shortcut to finishing her armor. She's agreed to break the law. And I think that we'll see her gradually learn that her stepdad was right. Building things the slow way creates an appreciation for the task because you're putting your entire heart into what you create. And then we learn that she and Natalie had their own dream, to drive around that Barracuda that Riri has sold. And when this triggers a panic attack, she refuses help and lashes out at her mother. Now we're seeing a destructive pattern begin here. Riri doesn't want to deal with her emotions. She would rather project blame onto others. And this is because ultimately she probably blames herself for the deaths of her best friend and stepdad. This is why she wants to create the armor, not just to save lives, but so she can stop feeling guilty about letting them die. The montage of her repairing her armor is a deliberate homage to Tony Stark building his suit. We see the goggles, pounding metal on an anvil, looking at the faceplate, and just like Tony Stark in Iron Man 3, she is burying her trauma in her work instead of actually coping with it. And this is intercut with Parker getting more ink. Now the ink, like we said, has demonic imagery and it could be amplifying his power. So Riri and Parker are both gathering more power to themselves at the same time. She plugs her laptop into this H-shaped device that she took from MIT, which might be the processor to create a new AI. The song playing during the montage is Sinner Man by the great Nina Simone, and it's an incredible song choice. The lyrics start off with, "Sinner Man, where you gonna run to?" Just like Riri is trying to run from her guilt, her supposed sin of letting her loved ones die. In the song, Sinner Man is rejected by the rocks and the rivers and by the Lord, and the Lord tells him to go to the devil. Just like how Riri has tried to build her armor with the Wakandans and an MIT, but now she's forced to turn to the demonic help from Parker Robbins. And the chorus is repeating the word power. Now, of course, Riri needs power to build her physical suit, but she's also looking for power in her life. The power to prevent other people from dying, and the power to make herself feel more important. And on the lyrics, "Go to the devil," we cut to Parker stashing his cloak, which again in the comics was owned by a demonic entity. And the evil whispers here, are like the cryptic language of the demon that he steals it from in the comics. From a psychological perspective, Riri creating the iron suit to help and protect people is also representative of her need to protect herself from grief and loss, but also is a means to feel in control. On the night of her father's death, Riri felt helpless and anything but in control. So, building her suit lets her regain that sense of power that she longs for in order to protect the people that she loves. She craves respect so that other people won't try her or threaten the people that she holds most dear. Meanwhile, Riri falls asleep thinking about her friend Natalie, which is probably why the AI takes her form. So I actually love this change from the comics. Seeing Tony Stark show up in the show would actually be a huge distraction. We'd be more focused on Robert Downey Jr. instead of Riri's journey. But Natalie, as her AI, connects the armor to Riri's trauma and gives her a chance for catharsis. Now, the sin at the end credits is called No Evil by Sir, and it is about a person examining themselves but not seeing any evil. As they say, I see another reason for me to believe in the hero, which sets up Riri's journey to become a hero for the rest of the season, looking past the evil inside of herself and finding the hero inside. And now let's move on to episode 2. We are introduced to the AI of Natalie, or as she calls herself.
You could call me neuro-autonomous technical assistant and laboratory intelligence entity instead.
Now, Riri having an AI appear as a person is taken from the comics, where her AI was a hologram of Tony Stark. Notice in her room we see a bear sticker, a Bulls poster, and the wallpaper on her computer is her stepdad's Barracuda. And this is the robot dog she won the science fair prize for, like we saw in the clipping last episode. And this is another parallel to Tony Stark, who built his first robots when he was just a kid at MIT. Riri confirms that she was trying to replicate Griot, Shuri's AI that helped her drive her suit in Wakanda Forever.
Hey, Mr. Griot! I could really use that backup right now.
I thought you'd never ask.
Outside, we see that she lives on Ironheart Avenue, which will eventually become her superhero name.
He said it! He said it!
Riri picking a name close to her roots is also similar to Kamala Khan, whose family shaped her superhero identity.
Our own little Miss Marvel.
At the meeting, we see the squad watching a video of Sheila Zarat talking about Tunnel, which was mentioned here last episode.
And we still got Tunnel, Heirloom, the big job.
She is working to build a private highway that, as we hear...
You mean, Sheila, I don't care if my tunnels destroy entire communities if it makes me rich? Zarate?
This is referring to how, when Americans built their superhighways in the mid-20th century, they were often built through black neighborhoods, decimating those communities. According to History.com, this happened in major cities like New York, Miami, Chicago, Minneapolis, Pittsburgh, Oakland, Nashville, Baltimore, Atlanta, and more. Tunnel uses electromagnetic tracks to move cars, similar to the maglev tracks that we saw hauling vibranium in Black Panther. Now, the gang gets Riri on their side by making it sound like they are doing this to protect their community, when in reality they want to profit from the destruction of their community. But this is just one more devil's bargain that Riri makes to get what she wants. Then we're formally introduced to everyone, and we learn that Slug is her Magicorp, the anything goes near lawless country where Baron Zemo did this. And all of this puts a ticking clock on Riri. To help with the heist, she needs a working set of armor. So Natalie helps her find a list of black market parts dealers in the Chicago area. And this list has some really fun Easter eggs on it. Daniel Horvath is a Hungarian footballer, Garrett Mitchell is a baseball player, while several Marvel crew members from this show and other projects are mentioned, such as Amy Hawkins, Haley Tierman, Nate Delker, Hero Lamb, Paul Gelhag. Ryan Airy is the name of a YouTuber for the channel ScreenCrush, and Mark Walters is the owner of the LA Dodgers.
Wait, did you say your name's on the list?
No, I don't think so. We have no black market tech here. But if somebody did put my name in the episode, then it's really a huge honor to be officially canon in the MCU. I just want to thank whoever did this and all you guys. I want to thank everybody for watching, and most of all, thanks to the incredible team that I work with, because I wouldn't be here without them.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible!
And then Natalie brings up that they used to sing Bonnie and Clyde by Jay-Z and Beyonce, a song about two people who say all they need is each other, just like Riri and Natalie, but hopefully they don't end up like the real Bonnie and Clyde.
And the Academy Award
Outside, Landon is hawking next to a poster for the Stark Expo. Now this is, of course, the annual celebration of cutting-edge science that Howard Stark began and that Tony continued in Iron Man 2. It's very cool to see that it's been continued even after Tony's death, even if now they are apparently promoting a dystopian future ruled by the droid control ships from the Phantom Menace. Now there's a QR code right here, which I'm sure connects to like an Iron Man comic or Riri's first appearance on Marvel Unlimited, but the screener was so blurry I could not get my phone to read it. If you know what it connects to, please let me know in the comments. Landon says,
"Hey, don't blame me.
Blame inflation.
And he's not kidding. Inflation would be terrible for people after the blip. 4 billion people suddenly flooding the market with cash? Eesh. Now, when she's on the L, she covers the armor with the stolen Cubs flag because it looks like the train is heading away from Wrigley after a Cubs victory. And then we meet Joe McGillicuddy. Now, there were some leaks about this guy's true identity, but to preserve spoilers, I'm not going to talk about them until the reveal. But this episode did drop some heavy clues about his past. Now, when he asked this woman to curb her dog, she's a real jerk about it.
How about you just pick up after her then? Does that work?
All out of boot bags, Joe.
You didn't even check.
No, well, I'll take care of it next time.
You know, I don't know. I mean, she's got a really good point. It is very hard to find just the right spot. I myself prefer to hover over a weed with my foot resting on a tree trunk.
Joe apparently had a tough past because he tries to channel his trauma by surrounding himself with live, laugh, love signs. And on the way to his stash, Riri encourages him to be more aggressive.
Joe, you gotta demand respect. Don't let Frank or your shitty neighbor or anybody else walk all over you. Except for me, I'm allowed.
And I hope that doesn't come back to haunt her later.
What could possibly go wrong?
They sing You Oughta Know by Alanis Morissette, which she actually wrote about Joey from Full House.
No way, really?
Yeah, look it up. You guys too, look it up.
What do you expect us to do? Work?
Meanwhile, her mom meets the AI for Natalie.
Just an AI coming from that little projector you got over there.
And isn't it interesting that in this universe, you can just say, hey, I'm an AI, and everybody's cool with it, even though an AI destroyed an entire country. In fact, on the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the events of Age of Ultron caused there to be a rule within S.H.I.E.L.D. that the scientists were not allowed to experiment with AI at all. Now, later in the episode, her mom asks,
Can you make one of Gary?
And this is an actual moral debate happening right now. Like, companies are creating AI therapists, AI girlfriends, and there are even platforms designed to recreate your dead loved ones. This was the subject of a great Black Mirror episode, Be Right Back, where Haley Atwell recreates her dead husband, Domhnall Gleeson. And now, the only thing about that episode that's not realistic is that Haley Atwell would be married to Domhnall Gleeson. Joe talks about how he's not a big believer in iron suits. He believes that bionics are the key to furthering human evolution.
I just mean that technology is meant to advance humanity. And bionics is about so much more than weaponry and defense. You can actually help people.
Now, this is laying the groundwork for some very interesting ideas when the X-Men finally enter the MCU. In X-Men 97, we saw a new generation of Sentinels that are essentially mind-controlled bionic humans, and we can see this adapted into live action when the X-Men finally launch in Phase 7. Also, notice in his lab, we see spools for 3D printing. Now, given the ending of this episode, I would not be surprised if Joe does turn himself into a cyborg before the finale. And frankly, I would love to see this character jump into the movies. Alden Ehrenreich is a great actor, and I think he'd be a great future villain. Now, when her armor becomes operational, we hear Ain't Nobody by Shaka Khan, with lyrics like Ain't Nobody Loves Me Better, which makes me think that this is about how Riri feels toward her armor. When she is in the suit, she feels powerful and in control. Now, on the mission, Natalie says,
Man, it's just like Spy Kids.
So Spy Kids is a badass film series written and directed by Robert Rodriguez. She's probably referring to this high-speed chase in Spy Kids 3D. And when they release The Hand, she says,
Thing better work, otherwise I'm gonna end up in jail.
Like in John Carpenter's The Thing?
No, although we do have a shirt that combines those two ideas. Links are below. No, she's actually talking about Thing, the free-moving hand from the Addams Family. Then Parker appears in Sheila's car with a loud breath. Now, in the comics, Parker can only stay invisible as long as he holds his breath, and this might be an homage to that. Now, the gang gets Riri to sign on by making it seem like they were social advocates.
Sheila, I don't care if my tunnels destroy entire communities if it makes me rich, Zarate.
But in reality, this was always a shakedown. But she falls further in temptation after the Hood saves her life. Notice his bullets seem to be powered in hellfire, just like in the comics when the Cloak gives his pistols enhanced abilities. Now, being held at gunpoint makes Natalie glitch, probably because she was built from Riri's trauma, and Riri still has panic attacks when she thinks about how Natalie died. Now, this is kind of the reverse of Iron Man 3, when Tony had a panic attack but the armor could still move. Now, it's the armor having a panic attack while Riri is the one who's trapped inside. Now, all of this is similar to the Hood's first heist in the comics when he accidentally shoots a police officer. In that comic, every time the Hood gives Parker a little advantage, that advantage takes a toll. In this case, the cop's widow eventually becomes the villain White Fang, who swears vengeance on him. Afterwards, the army flies down to meet Riri, and we see the solar panels and wind power, which, look, if the arc reactor could sometimes barely power Tony's armor, then wind and solar are only going to get Riri so far. Eventually, she's going to need
You're darn right, more power.
Behind her, we see posters for Faust. Now, the story of Faust is famous. It's about...
Well, that's Faust. He's gonna make a deal with the devil.
Notice, Natalie says...
I sense some crazy energy.
She couldn't analyze that energy because it's magical energy that's emanating from the cloak, which is tied to another dimension. Just remember that for later. And she mentions...
aliens, androids, wizards on our timeline.
And these are, of course, the same big three that Sam talked about.
Androids, aliens, and wizards.
At the gig, Xavier calls her
Young Padawan.
And of course, that's the name of Jedi apprentices. And then we find out that my girl Riri is a Trekker.
I just thought it was, Trekkies for life, but be your own people.
And man, does this make a lot of sense. Like, Star Trek is actual science fiction that is based in real science, where they even create like diagrams that show how the ship's engines run. Whereas Star Wars has always been a fantasy. We have things like the magic of the Force. Ironically though, Riri is working for a sorcerer right now, but she just doesn't know it yet. And then we cut to Parker hearing the demonic whispers of his cloak. And this is also similar to the comics when the cloak takes control of him and makes him speak in this otherworldly tongue. And now let's move on to episode 3. Episode 3 is all about the price of power and the devil's bargains. One of the things I like about this show, just 3 episodes in, is how well it captures what it feels like to grow up disadvantaged or poor. See, I grew up in a trailer park and I always had the mindset of, oh, we can't say go on vacation or go to a doctor because that's for those like other people who have money. And in this show, we're seeing people who have grown up with this same mindset. But for Riri, that lack of money has become intertwined with her PTSD and trauma. In the show's opening narration, she immediately draws a sharp contrast between her life and Tony Stark's.
It costs millions of dollars, which clearly I don't have.
And she also reveals that she and Tony built their suits for different reasons. See, Tony Stark got rich making weapons for money.
Peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy.
And he never stopped believing that peace could be obtained through weaponry. It's just that he only trusted himself with the weaponry, or with the AI, or with the Infinity Stones. And building the armor was always a way for him to handle his trauma. For instance, in Iron Man 3, it was because of his PTSD, and later his nanotech chest plate just in case aliens attack.
Because the truth is, I don't want to stop.
But on the other hand, Riri has her own PTSD. She watched her stepdad and best friend die in a violent act. Like Tony, she channels that trauma into her work. But instead of making weapons, she creates a suit that she thinks can help EMTs.
My suits would shorten the response time of first responders, firefighters, search and rescue teams, etc.
Like I said earlier, she thinks that maybe if she would have had that suit, then maybe her stepdad and Natalie would be alive. But unlike Tony Stark, she does not have the means to create the suit, which brings me back to what it feels like to be poor. Everybody in Parker's gang feels some sort of desperation. They were all ostracized from normal society and told they couldn't succeed because they were too different from the norm. Parker is driven by revenge, but the others are driven by a need to belong. But for Riri, she is too overcome by her own personal trauma to see past her own faceplate. John Truby wrote in The Anatomy of Story that every story centers on the lie that the character believes. In Riri's case, the lie that she believes is that becoming a criminal is justified because it will save lives. But the deeper lie is that she believes that saving lives will help her overcome her trauma. And this is why Natalie is the perfect AI for her. In this episode, she operates as the Jiminy Cricket on her shoulder, reminding her of the person that she was before she started making compromised moral choices. I love how this show is a commentary not just on poverty, but also trauma, morality, and the cost of obsession. So we open with the team celebrating like kids. They're even using their new money and a gun to show that they're not the most mature group of people who seriously consider the ethical ramifications of their actions. It's a very immature way to act. Doug! Sorry, person. As Slug talks about returning to Madripoor, Clown appears wearing the hood. Again, showing that none of them really know what it's like to be part of an actual criminal organization that has a hierarchy. Now, seeing John act so violently is a wake-up call to Riri because, remember, her best friend was killed by this type of gang violence. Then, Parker unveils their next target, Hunter Mason, CEO of Heirloom. Now, he is not a character from the comics, but there is a character in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles named Hunter Mason, aka The Hunt, who is one of the leaders of the Foot Clan. But originally, the Turtles were a spoof of Frank Miller's Daredevil comics, so the character is kind of MCU adjacent. Now, with every heist, notice that they're always tacking on some form of social activism. activism. This could be a commentary on the performative activism that we often see on social media, where people want to get clicks and likes by talking about how great they are and how the rest of you aren't doing enough. And they seem to see themselves as modern-day Robin Hoods, robbing from the rich and giving to the poor, except in this case, the poor are themselves. Now again, this is a moral justification that everyone on the team is making so they can have the benefits of being a criminal with none of the moral repercussions. And then Riri asks him, basically, what kind of criminals are they?
We Ocean's 11 or The Sopranos.
Now what she means is, are we stealing from people who deserve it, like Danny Ocean robbing the casino in Ocean's 11, or are we gangsters who hurt innocent people like Tony Soprano?
I'm sorry, Tony. I wouldn't do anything to insult you. Our kids go to the same school together.
And then she insists that she is not a criminal, which, like Mike Ehrmantraut said,
but you took something that wasn't yours, and you sold it for a profit. You're now a criminal.
But Riri can't work for something that she doesn't understand, so she presses for details.
I've seen something like that before. Vibranium? Pym Tech?
Of course, referring to the technology company owned by Hank Pym and his family. And after he says magic, her response is very interesting.
Magic is code for I don't know.
Now this is a universe where like gods and sorcerers are public knowledge, where they have like saved the world in public several times, but Riri is still skeptical. And this it goes really well with the MCU. See, the MCU has never been comfortable with the ideas of magic and godhood. To make sure that their universe felt cohesive with the movie Iron Man, they were very quick to explain that Asgardians are actually aliens, and then they explained magic this way.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
Even in Doctor Strange, the vast mysteries of the universe were explained.
We harness energy drawn from other dimensions of the multiverse to make magic.
Which means that sorcerers draw their power from other dimensions in the multiverse. And I'm curious to see if in this show they're going to define the Hood's powers as something based on the multiversal plane that can be scientifically quantified, or if the series is going to fully embrace magic. This would mean that Riri would have to realize that there are some things in the universe that she cannot explain away or control with her technological skills. So Riri tries to use her ill-gotten gains to make people happy, and much like the Hood's success in the comics, this happiness always comes with a price. Her success is always crushed and doomed to fail. For instance, when she buys Xavier new headphones, he tells her,
every scratch and scuff on these worn out earmuffs, Natalie put there. She was always borrowing them and just disrespectful.
Now the lesson here is that Riri's success and building new armor isn't going to help her get past her trauma. She has to actually take the time to remember Natalie and to mourn her if she can move forward. And then Zeke Stane shows up at her place with an array of new ideas. And all of these are part of those biosentinels that I mentioned earlier that we saw in X-Men 97.
3D printed corneas, a second iron stomach to make food poisoning a thing of the past. Nanotech muscle fibers that increase strength and invulnerability.
But I'm going to dive more into his story just a little bit later in the video. Now, as Natalie continues to be the voice of reason inside of her head, she tells her,
Dude, probably got you heisting parts for the next Death Star, I don't know.
And you know, I have no idea what she's talking about. There is no Death Star, only the Emperor's clean energy program that will provide the galaxy with... And as they leave, the Saweetie song Best Friend plays, and the day feels so natural that Riri actually slips up and refers to Natalie the AI as Natalie, her dead friend. And I'm not so sure this is healthy. Riri's arc needs to be learning how to deal with Natalie's death and not trying to replace her with the machine. But at the very least, AI Natalie is helping her to face her trauma and her panic attack when she goes back to Gary's garage.
My Nat was the only one who knew how to calm me down when I spiraled.
Now, what we keep seeing with Riri is that every time something good happens, like she has a nice day with her friend, this is always countered by something worse. Now, this is frankly just good storytelling, where each scene should be a yin and a yang, bringing the characters up or down. But it also shows the price of the choices that she has made. She's told herself that she can do
1, 2 more jobs and then I am out.
But then she finds out that Rampage is dead. Even John can feel that something isn't right with all of this, and he tells Parker not to be blinded by his vendetta.
You think the crew would be down to go into this half-ass just because you're blinded by your personal vendetta?
Wait, what's his Velveeta?
We don't vendetta, and we don't know what it is yet, but it seems like all of these tech CEOs screwed him over in some way. But then he found the cloak and made a bargain with some demonic force to get revenge. And then we also see how the cloak is starting to affect him. Like the One Ring, it starts to enhance his worst impulses and desires, making him angrier, making him greedier, greedier, but it also gives him not just superpowers, but enhanced charm and charisma.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he could roll a 20-sided die and definitely stab like a dragon with that, right?
You don't play D&D, do you?
I do not play, no.
Now back to Joe, aka Zeke Stane. Now we learned that he is the son of Obadiah Stane, the tech mogul who was the adversary of Tony Stark back in Iron Man 1. Now Stane was a cautionary tale for Tony because he represented the essence of the military-industrial complex. He just wanted to sell weapons and use war to make money, and he never had any sort of moral justification. Whereas Zeke, like Riri, is saying that he wants to use his technology to help people. And then he tells us the cover story that Obadiah was killed in a plane crash. And this is actually calling back to the very comics. Zeke also has a similar backstory. He kept his existence a secret, and he's not proud to be his father's son. But he is arrogant and believes that his tech is superior to Tony Stark's. In the comics, he becomes a villain who gives himself bio-enhancements like we see Zeke trying to do in this episode. I'm really hoping that he turns into a villain in this series and in the MCU going forward because he is a perfect counterpoint to Riri. They are both driven by dead loved ones to make technology which they think will make the world a better place. But they're building their technology with illegal means. It remains to be seen if Zeke will become the villain and Riri will become the hero. Now, when he asks why she's obsessed with Iron Man, she tells him that Greg was the big Iron Man fan. Now, as a fellow fixer, he saw something noble in a guy who just wanted to use his gifts to help. And remember, we saw another Iron Man superfan in Iron Man 3.
I don't know if you could tell, but I have like pattern my whole look after you.
And again, this shows us how Riri is making the suit to honor the people that she has lost, hoping that it will help her to get over her trauma. In the comics, Riri was actually the huge Iron Man fangirl, and he even saved her life when she was little. And then we go to the heist, and I gotta say, this whole sequence looked great. Now, we've had a lot of MCU shows that just look cheap and rushed, you know, like the hospital sequence in Secret Invasion. But remember, this show finished filming like 2 years ago, and they took all of this time to really refine the CGI. So I thought this whole sequence looked like it belonged on the big screen with elaborate sets, great CGI, and a climax where I was genuinely terrified for Riri. So the key to any heist sequence is that they explain the plan, but then of course the plan goes wrong and they have to improvise. And this is the exact plot of, for instance, every Ocean's 11 film. But here there's a twist that Riri is actually the thing that goes wrong because of her agenda to get a piece of the cloak. That's how she blows their cover. And I love how Natalie shows up in Riri's heads-up display to really show how they're having a conversation with each other and to show that she is literally the angel on her right shoulder trying to guide her conscience. And in addition to the heads-up display, the show has lots of tiny ways that Riri's armor takes different cues from Tony's. For instance, when they scan the facility, it's very similar to when Tony scans the Hydra facility for life signs at the start of Age of Ultron. Now the plan is to get the gang into the greenhouses so they can use them for leverage, while Riri will be the enforcer who stays topside. John calls her Ironhead, which, look, I just wish they would have called her Shellhead. That's Iron Man's nickname in the comics, and we never hear it in the MCU. Just once, it would have been nice.
That feels like a real missed opportunity.
Now Ramos, by the way, looks way better when the hood is up, and notice that Hunter is not surprised to see him at all. After the Sheila tunnel heist, he expected the Parker revenge tour to come to his doorstep, so he set a trap. Parker should have seen this immediately, but he was blinded by his need for revenge, so he just kept moving forward. Then Natalie says,
Hey, now get the hood, make like a tree and leaf.
which is an obvious callback to this.
So why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Close enough.
And just as Riri pushes her meter into the red, Clown lights the plants on fire. And notice how, from here on out, the sequence is gradually consumed by red, just like the readout of the facility itself. Red represents blood and violence and power, and of course, hellfire, like the demonic entity that created the Hood's red cloak. Slug says,
"We in danger, girl."
Which is a really fun callback to Whoopi Goldberg's Academy Award-winning role in Ghost.
You in danger, girl.
And then, just as Hunter says,
You have no power here.
this hits Parker where it hurts. He has been told for his whole life that he is small and powerless, and this rage opens up a door for the cloak to speak to him. And so, he disregards greed and instead gives in to wrath. And to turn invisible, he does have to hold his breath. So I guess this does activate his cloak's invisibility power just like in the comics. Probably because the evil of the cloak can't be used by any breathing entity. Riri tries to pull a Die Hard, but then is trapped in the vent. And this is a moment that I think works so well because, you know, we have seen the hero in the vent many times. But we naturally expected her to easily escape through the tunnel like many heroes have done before. But again, we keep seeing how Riri's immoral decisions create a monkey's paw situation for her. Every time she gets what she wants, there is always a price. And then Riri runs into John, and this sequence was terrifying. Like, it is so rare in any superhero project for me to actually feel like the hero is in real danger. But Riri is not a trained fighter. She's a kid who, by the way, has a limp. And so we know this guy can and will kill her. And in the struggle, he comes at her with his knife, but Riri uses a keyboard as a shield, a subtle way to show how technology is always her best weapon for protection. And then the armor comes for Riri, and there's this moment that will haunt her for the rest of her life. Natalie gets her out of there, and they leave John behind. Now, Riri didn't make a conscious choice to murder here, but she also didn't speak up. Either way, a man is dead, and she could have prevented it. She already became a criminal, and now she is a murderer.
It is only natural. He cut off your arm, and you wanted revenge.
And we have never, ever seen a character in the MCU go through something like this before. When most heroes kill people, it's always like a henchman or somebody who is dehumanized in some way. But this is a real guy who, by the way, just a few scenes ago was advising caution and compassion for his cousin. And we watch him die, dude, like on Disney Plus. This scene goes hard. And notice, as Parker hears the news, his face is slowly shrouded in red. Riri realizes she left the biomesh behind, and the full weight of what just happened sinks in.
Whoa, Riri, your arm, the biomesh.
Parker yells out at supernatural forces, cursing their bargain, kind of like two cathedrals in the West Wing.
What? Is this a part of the plan?
That's not enough to buy me out of the doghouse? Hey, Credo, my Deo Pio.
Now, as soon as he swears to leave this entity's service, it shows him a vision of John dying and who is responsible. Through a haze of parcel-tongue whispers, the armor shadow overtakes Parker, just like he's about to be consumed by vengeance against the person who took away his cousin. And notice Riri also ends the episode mired in a panic attack and bathed in red light. So guys, that's everything we caught. Again, I am incredibly amazed that my name somehow appeared in this show, and I just want to thank whoever did that, but also mostly thank the staff who work really hard every day and put these videos together. And I want to say, I really like these first 3 episodes. I feel like this show is attacking themes that we have never seen before in the MCU, and I hope that it gets the ratings and attention that it deserves. But did you catch anything that we missed? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky Threads, or on our free-to-join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.